On the latest episode of the PCT podcast, we are joined by a strength and conditioning coach who is working with some of the top athletes in their fields. So without further ado, I welcome to you today, Trevor Oliver. How are you today?
Thanks for having me on, mate. Really, really good. Hope you had a good Christmas.
Yeah, it's not been too bad, mate. Not been too bad. Just want to say, how are you and the family? Obviously, we're coming out of a strange Christmas period, as you mentioned there, where we've not had the usual stuff that we do. How have you found it, and how's the business going?
Yeah, it's definitely been tough. There's been a lot of restrictions placed. Luckily enough, work-wise, a lot of the pro guys have had clearance to get a good amount of training in, so we've been able to kind of keep up with that. But apart from work, it's been really, really strange. And on a personal note as well, from starting and opening a new business this year, it's been certainly been tough.
So let's go into a little bit. You mentioned that it's a strange time, and 2020 is the year that maybe you sat down with a business plan and went, right, this is my year. I'm going to go out on my own. How have you found it during this lockdown in the first year of business?
It's been testing, really, really testing. I think if I had said to myself that I would have opened and started my own business a year ago, I probably would have laughed at myself, because it's not something that I've ever really wanted to go down. So I kind of caught myself by surprise by doing it in the first place. But no, it's certainly been challenging. But like I say to everybody in these times, I think you either sink or you swim. There's always a kind of way to adapt and overcome things. And so far we've managed to find those ways to getting over things. So fingers crossed, 2021 is a little bit easier than 2020 was.
Fingers crossed, and I'm sure it will be for you, Trev. Just before we go on to sort of the crux of the conversation today, can you just tell us and the listeners a little bit about what it is you currently do? We've mentioned your business, but we don't know what it is you're actually doing.
Yeah, so I'm a strength and conditioning coach, worked in sports science as well, and probably add personal trainer to that list too. So I work with a vast range of athletes, from professional MMA fighters, footballers, boxers, rugby players, golfers, all sorts of athletes. We've just opened a new facility in Stone called Ambition. So that's where we work out of now. So yeah, that's a really, really precise background right there.
So let's go to your career to date, because I'm sure doing all those roles that you mentioned and working with some of the top athletes that you have spoke about doesn't come overnight. So just wanted to talk about your career. Where did it all start then, Trevor? Did you play? Was there any sports that you specialised in? And where did this love of coaching and developing others come from?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, as you're a young kid, every young boy wants to be a professional footballer, but I think I very, very quickly realised that wouldn't be happening. So the love of kind of football and sport kind of stemmed from that as a young boy, and just getting involved in a lot of different sports and playing football and cricket and stuff like that. So I think from a young age, I always wanted to be involved in sport some way or another. It was never going to be a case of me just heading straight for an office job or anything like that. It was always going to be something sport related. So yeah, from my personal point of view, I never really played at a high level. I never kind of went to those heights. It was more a case of just becoming interested in sport. And then from leaving school, I went into college and studied sports coaching and sports science, and then kind of went off to uni from there and went deeper and further into that. And then that's how I kind of ended up where I am today.
So when you attended college and you did the sports science studies there, was there a particular career path you wanted to go down at that point, or were you pretty much open to where you wanted to go?
Yeah, it was quite a funny one, actually. I did originally dip my toe in video analysis and kind of performance analysis. So when I left college, I kind of had that in the back of my mind. So I thought, I'm going to give it a go. So ended up kind of having that as a little kind of side study period that I did. I went and did some work with Stoke City Ladies, but in Albion on the video analysis side of things. But again, quickly found that, sitting behind a computer, analysing all day, just wasn't for me. I needed to be out there, needed to be practical, needed to be doing bits and bobs. So yeah, sitting behind a computer definitely wasn't it, and that was kind of quickly squashed. I think I probably, give or take a few months, was probably at that for about a year before I decided it wasn't something that I was going to pursue.
You mentioned there working with Burton and obviously Stoke City Ladies. Was there a point that you actually enjoyed it? And then for me there, you alluded to it wasn't for you, and you pretty much prefer the practical side.
Yeah, I think, look, from like a selfish point of view, being involved in any kind of competitive football, even though it wasn't at the highest level at that time, I was still in and around that environment where, you know, you would sometimes be walking past pro players and or dropping in on meetings or speaking to different type of people. So from that point of view, it was really good for me to get into a kind of professional football environment, see how things are run, how people do things behind the scenes. So I think that even though it wasn't something that I wanted to pursue, I definitely took a lot away from that, 100%.
So after your time at college, you went on to study at university and undertook a sports performance and coaching course. Tell us a little bit about what that entailed and how you found that.
Yeah, so it was actually really good. I was quite a strange one at uni. I never really liked the nightlife or the going out and the partying side of things. So I think I took a little bit of stick for that over the years. But no, it was really enjoyable. 100% learned a lot. I went to MMU, so Manchester Met. Met some great people. Had a really good chance to see some really good practical side of things, and again, just network, meet people that are involved in the game of football, and obviously football being my sport and being what I've done as a boy, it was always in the back of my mind that, you know, one day I'd love to go and work in professional football full time.
So not long after university, then a move to the US followed. How did that become about, and what was the thought process about going abroad at such a young age?
Yeah, so I think somebody came into uni one day, and they were kind of recruiting and looking for coaches. And it seemed again like another great opportunity to just get out there, meet a lot of different people. Who knows, there might have been some business opportunities out there. There might have been some job opportunities. So I jumped at the chance, and went out to go work in Texas for a good few months during the summer, which was absolutely roasting, really, really hot. But again, a fantastic experience, fantastic opportunity. And again, I was coaching a lot of football then, so I was getting to see how different coaches work, how you interact with players. And I think all these different aspects of what I was learning and kind of interacting with other people on were going to help me later on in life, 100%.
So something I've just picked up on there, Trevor, is that you mentioned now with the analysis and obviously the trip to the USA, it was a great opportunity to learn. Teams with that and what you said there about, you know, not really interested in the university life of partying and drinking, etc. How important has that been for you at a young age to say, do you know what, I'm going to take these opportunities, I'm going to learn from them? And how would you say, and I'm sorry it's a long-winded question, but how would you say it's benefited you now, looking back at those opportunities that you grasped?
Yeah, I think 100%, first of all, it's helped me without a shadow of a doubt. I definitely took a lot of stick at the time for being somebody who didn't enjoy going out and you know, getting hammered all the time. But no, having that opportunity to even if it was to just sit silently in the background and listen to a few conversations, or, you know, be out an hour extra on the training field and just, you know, watching how different people interact between each other was absolutely priceless. I think that over the years, especially if you want to be good at your field, you kind of have to become a sponge. And those little bits of information build up throughout the year so much and over the years so much that by the time you get to kind of where you want to be or the dream of where you want to be, every single extra little hour that you've gained or extra little bit of information that you've gained adds up to you getting there. So for me, yeah, absolutely invaluable. It's not going to be for everyone, and I'm not saying that if you go to university you don't go out and get hammered or have a drink or enjoy it with your mates, but it just wasn't something for me. I was really focused on what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to work in professional sport, and I knew that it wasn't going to be easy, so I took those extra opportunities.
Fantastic sort of advice there for anybody listening, that these opportunities may come and go, and some may turn their nose up at it, and some may be afraid to, I don't say afraid, but wary of taking that step. What was the biggest thing that you maybe had to overcome when the USA trip came about?
I think it was probably just leaving home and kind of going off on my own, and it was the first time that I kind of had a big opportunity to go away and be me. I was still young. I think I was in my second year of university, so it was a massive step for me. But I think that those kind of things help build your character. And again, character comes into play later on in life when you want to be up there for those roles that you're constantly chasing.
A fantastic experience. It sounds that it's obviously played a big part in your life. And when you returned, you undertook a master's in strength and conditioning. What was the reason for going down that path? When you're saying that you were doing a lot of football coaching, why then the change to strength and conditioning?
Yeah, so I think that, like I said before, it was always kind of in the back of my mind. It was always something that I wanted to pursue. After the video analysis and kind of knowing that wasn't really for me, and that wasn't the path that I wanted to go down, I then knew that I had this option. And I've always been interested in the gym. I was always interested in the deep line sports science behind why we do certain things, and the biomechanics of the game and stuff like that. So yeah, I actually did like a master, like a practical master's internship with a company called Sport 981, which was through Nottingham Trent University. So I went there and did that for a year, and that was absolutely phenomenal as well. We had a lot of opportunities to work with some really good up and coming athletes, some athletes that were on the Olympic pathways. And that was the first time where I think I really had a chance to work with people who I kind of had their future in my hands, if you will. Their athletic development was kind of down to me for a couple of months. And I think that was the first time where I sat down and realized how big of a role this could be, and how much responsibility a strength and conditioning coach or sports scientist, even a personal trainer, has on their shoulders. I mean, you've got someone else's livelihood in your hands. So I think that was the first time where I kind of sat down and thought, this certainly isn't easy, but it was so rewarding to be able to sit there, program for someone, and try and take them from point A to point B, and hopefully see them with success at the end of it.
So that's all you qualify then as a performance enhancement specialist. Try to say that again. And you undertook work with a local gym, True Grit Training, and more exposure to working with athletes across a range of sports. Was this then the dream job?
No, I think it was definitely far from the dream job. But yeah, you're right. I went and qualified through the National Association of Sports Medicine. So through them, I qualified as a performance enhancement specialist and a corrective exercise specialist, on top of the kind of master's year that I did there through Sport 981. But yeah, no, True Grit was definitely again a really good learning curve for me, because again I was around so many different coaches. I was getting to learn and sit back and observe. And for lack of trying to find a better term here, it was interesting coming off a kind of master's level year of internship down into True Grit, and just seeing how different coaches interacted with clients or athletes compared to what you've kind of learned and studied over the last year. So it definitely wasn't a kind of dream role for me. It was something that, again, I wanted to go into, get some experience, learn from, and then see where I could move to next.
Superb. Not long after joining True Grit, the opportunity to work back in football came around, and you began to work with Port Vale Football Club under Michael Brown as the assistant first team sports scientist. Tell us a little bit about how that came about, the role there, and what would your average week sort of look like?
Yeah, I seem to remember bumping into you one day there, actually. I think you had a player on trial, didn't you?
Yes, we did, yeah.
So yeah, no, that was absolutely spectacular. That was the kind of role that I'd been striving towards. It had been the role that I had wanted to dip my toe in for a long time. Unfortunately, it didn't kind of last as long as I wanted it to, down to a few different reasons. One of them being the manager leaving, but no, it was absolutely brilliant to be able to work with all those guys on a day-to-day basis. And again, I think I kind of thrive off knowing that we've got a professional football team here, and their kind of physical preparation demands and success is kind of in our hands day to day, and that was really, really cool for me.
So again, what was the average day and average week look like? Just for people who are looking to get into strength and conditioning, what was the sort of program like for the players building up to match day?
Yeah, so I think it's going to vary a lot depending on what kind of setup you're in. I mean, firstly, the lower league clubs, kind of maybe don't invest as much as they should into the strength conditioning and sports science side of things. So I found that particularly at Port Vale, we were very, very limited in the type of stuff we could do, the equipment we had and stuff like that. But yeah, so a standard day would look like the players would come in, would have a little warm up and preparation room set up for them. So they'd come in, do their foam rolling, do their prehab. Some players would have individual stretches that they need to go through. If they were struggling with any little niggly injuries or anything like that, they'd come in and get a rub down before they went out to training. And then every kind of training day would have a different emphasis. So for example, on a Monday, we might come in and the warm-up emphasis might be on a little bit of power work. So we might have the resistance bands out and do a little bit of resisted steps, some lateral movement, stuff like that. So every single day kind of had a different focus. Then Tuesday we might move into plyometrics. Wednesday we might have a game day, or Wednesday we might be off. So every day had kind of a little micro focus, if you will, and that's how we kind of worked our way through the week.
Were you able to plan in advance, or was it very much you had to be quite adaptive in that role to the day-to-day sort of work?
Yeah, so I think strength and conditioning is a strange one. I think it's the only, or one of the only forms of kind of exercise where we need to work backwards. So the majority of our work is done in pre-season, right? So that's kind of the biggest time frame that we have to get a player physically prepped and ready for the demands of the season that's coming up. Especially in the lower leagues, once you hit that season and you're playing Saturday, Tuesday, and you've got a few cup games thrown in there as well. There's very, very little time to get to work with a player and essentially improve them athletically. The demands are just too high in that time. So pre-season prep is huge for that. So that's really where we have to sit down and say, right, what date does the season start? So we have the kind of date that we want to get to, and then we work backwards from that. So we'll have a range of different KPIs. For example, players need to be hitting a certain number on back squats, deadlifts, whatever it might be. And then we kind of work backwards from those KPIs. So we say, right, okay, we need everybody to be hitting these targets by this time. If they're not, then we know we're not on target. If they are, brilliant, we're making really, really good progress. So that's the kind of thought process, very briefly, that we'll kind of work through towards the start of the season.
Superb. And you mentioned there or you mentioned previously that a change in manager obviously saw you unfortunately finish your time with the club, and in fact the whole sports science team was scrapped at that point. How frustrating was that then, Trev? The fact that you've worked so hard, you've taken these experiences, you've got into what was probably an ideal job, to then lose your job based on and I'm going to be quite out there, almost an archaic sort of an opinion.
Yeah, it's tough, it really is. Like you say, to get into a strength and conditioning role or a sports science role today, and if there is any coaches that are kind of up and coming and looking to get into that, you've got to be ready to jump through a lot of hoops, work for not a lot of money, maybe free sometimes. And I think the amount of money and time that you spend investing in yourself to get yourself to that position for that role, and then to have it taken away so quickly is crazy, really. It really, really is. But it does just show how the kind of, there is a fickle side of football, and at the end of the day, you are reliant on the results of the team and the manager's performance. But yeah, Michael Brown left. Neil Aspin came in. He had his own ideas. I think he was a little bit more old school. Let's just put it that way. So he came in, decided that there wasn't a need to have me there and some of the other guys there. He actually made the decision to bring some of his own coaches in and kind of fill the sports science and strength and conditioning roles with some more football coaches, which is absolutely fine. If that's how the manager sees it, then that's how the manager sees it. But yeah, it was a little bit of a crazy time, but it's just something that I think I had to go through and definitely opened my eyes a lot.
So at this point, Trevor, had you or did you lose any love for the game at this point? And something I'm quite keen on in getting out to any listeners is frustration and disappointment part of the journey? Because I'm going to say any lesser people might think, right, that's it, football's done, I'm not doing this anymore. Was there any point where you thought that's it, or did it just spur you on to go, do you know what, I'm going to come back bigger, better, stronger?
Yeah, I think you definitely have a brief, slight little moment where you think to yourself, I've gone through all this, and this is absolutely crazy. But that was a split second thought, and after that, it was exactly how you say it. It was one of those where you think to yourself, right, I love this. This is something that I'm truly passionate about. So it's not ever going to be a case of me just walking away from it. But I did feel that I had to adapt and maybe make my path slightly different to what I had planned before. And that was where I kind of, sat down and reevaluated things and decided to make the jump to kind of move privately and start working with athletes on a private basis. Like I said before, I think we touched on it, where the lower league clubs now, the funding for the sports science and strength and conditioning side of things is so low. So I think down there in those League One, League Two, and kind of, semi-pro and kind of conference teams, it's so tough to be able to, number one, deliver an effective program because of the lack of resources that you actually have, and number two, to strive to actually better yourself, in terms of CPD and being able to kind of improve yourself. I think you spend so much time trying to do 101 different roles when you're in that position because there's a lack of staff in there. You very rarely have time to kind of focus on improving yourself as well as the team.
It's quite interesting that. And you mentioned that you went back and you continue to work with a range of athletes across all sports and eventually setting up your own business. Was there anything in particular that made you take the leap into becoming your own boss?
I think that stage where Michael Brown got relieved and Neil Aspin came in, and I just had a little kind of snippet of how fickle your job can be. It's your job's on the line. Another manager comes in. If he doesn't see fit or he doesn't feel like he needs you in that role, then you're gone. And for me, I didn't like not having that security or not being able to have that power in my own hands. So I think that was a big kind of precursor for me to move into the private side of things.
So you're working with a range of athletes, and not just in football, as you mentioned, MMA, rugby players, etc. Tell us a little bit about how you work with and how each training program may vary between these athletes.
Yeah, so training programs, so yes, they kind of do vary, but also every single athlete will follow the kind of same kind of foundation and structure, if that makes sense. So as a strength and conditioning coach, my number one priority is to make sure that my athletes stay healthy, and their injuries for the season or for the camp are, in the very, very low percentages. So number one, that's the main focus. That's the main aim. Secondary to that you then kind of come into a zone where you have to split the athletes up. Okay, so every athlete will have a different needs analysis. So, for example, let's take Ashley Reese, who's one of my MMA fighters who fights professionally on Bellator. He has to perform for 3 5-minute rounds, and those needs and that kind of needs analysis is going to be a lot different to, for example, one of my professional footballers who plays centre back and needs to keep going for 90 minutes throughout, different high intensity sprints, different lateral movements, quick stopping movements. So I think once you've kind of ticked the box of, I'm doing everything I can to make my athlete safe, I'm doing everything I can to as much injury prevention as possible, then you can move on to the more specific side of things and say, right, how can I improve this athlete specifically down to their sport or their position? Then you kind of get into the needs analysis of, right, how does my athlete move? What's the general movement pattern like when he's performing a sprint or a punch or a kick? And then that's where you kind of get more into detail on how you can improve those aspects.
So just how important then is it to understand each athlete personally and the needs for their needs and the physical demands to better tailor that program? Is it a case that you mentioned earlier where you work backwards again, or talk to us about that? I'm quite not clued up at this area.
Excuse me. No, hugely. I think, especially for me, so whenever I'd get a new athlete in, it would be a case of sitting down, right? I'm sure every single strength coach will have a different battery of tests that they'll probably go through for different athletes, or they might have a set battery for one, but you would kind of essentially take an athlete through a set battery of tests, and you'd have a kind of foundation knowledge then of where that athlete's at. And then, like I say, from there, it's really important that every single athlete has a needs analysis. So, what's the past injury history, position specific, how do they move? And yeah, it's really, really important. But kind of linking that back into football, especially at the lower leagues, again, it's so tough to be able to do that, especially when there's only one of you, or at the most, maybe two of you, maybe you've got an assistant. But to be able to focus individually on a player throughout the season is extraordinarily tough. So I think a lot of the time you'll look at athletes and you'll look at players, and I think coaches should do this as well, and you'll know which one of your players are more athletically gifted than the others, let's just say. So, kind of genetics come into play a lot. You're going to have, I don't know, a winger who's really, really quick, and those fast players are going to be a lot more susceptible to sprains or, slight little tears or whatever it might be. They're going to be a lot more susceptible than the big centre forward who very rarely sprints and is a target man. So I think for coaches out there at those lower leagues, at those lower levels, looking to kind of create that injury prevention or to try and stay on top of their team's fitness, it's important to maybe pick those players out and understand that some players athletically are a little bit more advanced than others, and they're the ones that you kind of need to put a little bit more focus on.
Fantastic. And obviously, for those that have listened to the podcast or know me, and like yourself, our chosen sport is mainly football. And for me, the strength and conditioning element is becoming more and more prevalent in football. How important is it for coaches now in the current climate to have a good understanding around this area?
Yeah, I think it's huge, especially if you are somebody who strives to make improvements. It's absolutely massive. Like I said to you before, and we've touched on a few times, it's also tough because I think funding comes into play a lot. But to have the basic movements down of performing a back squat and a deadlift, and maybe some form of lunge, there's some basic things that you can do that are going to help improve your team's performance throughout the season. And I think to have a well-rounded pre-season program as well is absolutely vital. And I've been around football again for a while now, and seeing a lot of teams that just kind of put that to the side because they think that they don't have the funding to do it, or they can't do it, or they don't have the knowledge to do it, I think is leaving a lot on the table. So it's going to be in coaches' interest definitely to dip their toe and just have a little bit of knowledge in that.
sort of touches on the next question I was going to throw your way, is that with the way that the game is moving and the physical demands of the game, is strength and conditioning going to have to be something that all aspiring coaches will need to have an area of knowledge in if they want to succeed? And I think you slightly alluded to it earlier in terms of wearing different hats in a club at the lower levels. How valuable would that be to a coach now to say, do you know what, I could take this on and I could take this on and ultimately add more value to the club rather than take from the club, if that makes sense?
Yeah, hugely, I think so. Look, I think that from a professional point of view, I think every single coach needs a little bit of knowledge in how to prepare a player for a game, whether that's, prehab techniques or, just knowing how to spend 2 days or 48 hours running up to the game, how to get a player physically prepped and ready for that game, which I don't think would take a lot. But I think to have that little bit of knowledge is going to be absolutely massive. Like you say, especially at the lower leagues where you may be running around and you're trying to be a sports scientist and a strength and conditioning coach, and you've got to deal with the GPS data and then, making sure certain players aren't hitting too much load for that week and whatever else it might be. So, it's going to be absolutely vital. And I think that, especially now in modern day football, it's definitely growing a little bit more, but there's still a lot of old coaches there who believe in that old style of, let's just run players through brick walls. But at the end of the day, I mean, you'll be able to tell me this, but it looks like coaches want to play a more expansive style of football now, where it's always like a high press and it's high intensity for long durations during a match. So if that's the way that coaches want to play, then you've got to be ready to adapt your team and have your team physically ready for
that. I think that's great advice there. And we mentioned that the modern game is getting quicker and faster. And, I think personally, coaches are going to have to adapt very quickly or fall by the wayside. And something I've noticed a little bit more recently as well is that you've worked with some of the top athletes in their field as well as non-league teams. We're starting to see it a little bit more now, but has there been any difficulties for players at non-league buying into a strength and conditioning program and looking after the bodies as well as, professional athletes?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Having worked down there in that, that semi-pro environment, it's extraordinarily tough to get a player to buy into a strength and conditioning program. But again, I think it comes down to the manager and or the head coach or whoever's in charge. I think it really does come down to them. I think I've seen it in the professional environment as well, where coaches kind of, they'll say, right, you're in the gym today, but that's the end of it. Players won't turn up. Players might turn up and do the very bare minimum and then walk out. So I think a lot of that comes down to the coach side of things. How much, like we touched on before, how much do they believe in it? How much have they bought into it themselves? And yeah, I think that's where it starts.
You've got a pretty impressive cohort of clients who you work with. Talk to us around the demands on yourself as a strength and conditioning coach and your workload. What does your average week look like? And I know COVID and the restrictions may impact that, but how does your week look like, and how important is it for you to manage your time?
Yeah, so especially since opening the business, it's been a little bit manic, to say the least. And then, like you say, with COVID thrown in there, it's just been absolutely crazy. But a normal kind of week for me would be having the guys popping in. A lot of the time, I am conversing with the sports scientists at whichever club the lads are coming in from, talking specifically on football here, obviously. So there's a lot of conversations going on there. How are they performing? What's the GPS data looking like? Is there any little things that they need to be focusing on more this week or less? Are they starting on the weekend? How much load can they get through this week? So it's a lot of time planning. Everybody thinks that the most important part is kind of taking a player through the session, but that's the easiest part. It's sitting down and making sure that player is physically ready for the demands of that session, and then the training session the next day that they're going to have to do at the club, and then the game that they've got the day after that. So there's a lot of planning that goes into it. And like I said to you before, I think this role sometimes looks glamorous to people, and they can say that they're working with professional athletes and footballers and whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, you have to sit back and realize that these guys are professional athletes. Their livelihood is in your hands. So if your programming is poor, if your periodization is poor, if your data is poor, you're not going to have that insight and that knowledge to make sure that you are taking them forwards as opposed to taking them backwards. I mean, you've seen as well, and you'll know with having the time off, the prevalence in ACL and MCL injuries now, you know, knee injuries and hamstring injuries and stuff like that, with being off so much, are absolutely huge. But you know, a player tears an MCL or an ACL, they're out for 6-8 months, and that's 6-8 months of their career that they've lost. So I think making sure that you're on top of things, absolutely huge.
How important then is it that with communication with the clubs that you work with, you know, you have their athletes, and ultimately, how important is it to build and maintain that trust?
Yeah, huge. Yeah, absolutely huge. I think, like I said before, there's a lot of coaches out there, and unfortunately, there's a lot of charlatans out there that like the idea of working with high-profile people or high-profile athletes, and I think that sometimes puts clubs on high alert. So there's a lot of times where if I'll get a new athlete working with me, the coach or the sports scientist at the club might give me a shout and almost grill me a little bit and just make sure that you're up to scratch, because that's how important it is, you know. It really is that important. So I think the idea of working with athletes is really, really cool, but you've just got to make sure that the conversations are there, and they happen almost daily with me, just to make sure that the player or the athlete is up and running to 100%.
Superb. And Trev, what advice would you give to any young athletes looking to gain a career out of their chosen sport? And bear in mind as well, something I'm quite interested in is we've just been through a period of sort of 7 to 9 months where maybe, and look, this isn't everyone, but a lack of support towards their players and a lack of contact. How important is it now for these athletes to take a little bit of ownership in that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you've hit the nail right on the head there. You know, we talk about coaches and managers having to take a little bit of responsibility, but yeah, a huge amount of it, especially this year, has to fall on a player's head as well. And I'm finding more and more with the athletes that I'm working with, they're dipping their toe more and more into the world of sports science and strength and conditioning, and trying to understand the things that they can do to help improve themselves. And I think in a weird way, this situation in this year, 2020, has actually helped more players to do that, because they haven't had the luxury of being able to go to their strength and conditioning coach or go to the club. They've had to kind of find ways around it and find out how they can kind of keep those KPIs up and those kind of key performance indicators. So yeah, huge. And I think that especially if you're a young athlete looking to make it, having that little bit of knowledge is going to help you 100%. There's so much more to you reaching the top than just turning up at a training session and performing well during training. It might go well for 4, 6, 8 weeks, but 12 months down the line, you're going to start seeing those little injury patterns turning up, and that's where trouble happens.
So how important then, teams of that, is the nutrition and diet for the athletes, and again, that self-discipline to maintain that longer than that, you know, 6-8 week sort of fad, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and again, the whole nutrition and diet side of things is, again, especially in the lower leagues, I can't speak for the Championship and Premier League because I haven't been there, but I've got colleagues that work there, and I'm sure it's different level and different gravy, but yeah, a huge lack of knowledge. Again, I personally work with a lot of players who you speak to them about nutrition, right? Okay, what have we had today? What are we having tomorrow leading into the next training session? And I'm just going to say how it is. You see players nipping off to Nando's and McDonald's and stuff like that, and it's just the way it is at the moment. But that, again, that's something that you know, I think players need to take up their own responsibility with. Nutrition is going to be, you know, 80% of their success, if not more. But I don't think a lot of them realize it quite yet.
How frustrating is that for you then, as a coach, when you do? And I'm sure, you know, you're like most coaches, and I certainly do it, where you follow your players on social media to ensure that they're they're doing the right things. How frustrating is that when you see them, nipping off, or they've had that McDonald's or that Nando's, and does it make you want to pull your hair out?
Yeah, it's frustrating, it really is, especially when you work with an athlete for so long and you can see the potential. Again, we'll tie it back to football because it's a football podcast, but especially the guys who can push and play at a higher level, but maybe their weight or their body type are kind of holding them back a little bit. And this goes for both people who maybe indulge and eat a little bit too much, and players who maybe don't eat enough. So you've got two ends of the spectrum there, and I've seen both of them 100%. But yeah, it's a shame to see that lack of knowledge is there, because I think if it was there, you'd see players maybe progressing a little bit more. You'll probably know better than me again, but the demands on players in the Championship and Premier League to be 7 to 10% body fat is kind of like a precursor now, and if you're anything over that, they're probably not even going to look at it.
Yeah, long gone are the days of maybe a Jan Molby and a John Parkin bossing midfielders.
Yeah, we haven't seen one of those for a while, have we?
No, that's it. Before we finish off with our quick fire question round, Trevor, I want to ask, what advice would you give to anybody looking to forge a career in strength and conditioning and working with elite level athletes?
I think that the first and major thing is be ready to give your time up for nothing. And as crazy as that sounds, you've got to be willing to give both hands out and be willing to give as much as you can without receiving much. There's been a lot of times where I've spent 12 months, 6 months, 8 months working with people or clubs and getting absolutely nothing. But that is your route into where you want to be. So I think just be willing to make those sacrifices. You're not going to walk into a job where you're earning 30, 40, 50, 60 grand a year straight away. So just be willing to make those sacrifices. And I think that is the biggest thing, the biggest bit of advice that I could give to anybody, is just be willing to get your head down, take your licks, and go in there and kind of learn and be a sponge and not expect much in return.
Fantastic. And I think that is real, and I'm going to steal somebody else's slogan here, but real gold dust.
Yeah.
We live in an era in a society where everything is readily available, and we want things now and done yesterday, last week. So be ready to give your time up for nothing, and to willing to make those sacrifices is some superb advice. This is the chance. I've put you on the spot for around 45 minutes now, and this is the chance where we make you squirm a little bit, and maybe chance for you to dig others out. But quick fire question round, and again, it's not usually that quick. But what's been the best moment in your career to date?
I'm gonna go with last year. One of my MMA fighters, Ashley Reese, fought on main event on Bellator over in Milan. So we flew over there, walking out in front of a packed out stadium of 10,000 people live on TV. Having worked with Ash, from him fighting in old abandoned warehouses in front of 10, 15 people, to a 10,000 sellout stadium on live TV main event was, crazy.
Wow. Shivers then. What's been your biggest wow moment?
Biggest wow moment? Probably my time in professional football and just seeing how things run. I'm not going to mention any names or go into any deep stories, but there's certainly a lot of how do we put this? There's certainly a lot of different ways of working that people will go around things. So yeah, let's just leave it at that.
Fair enough. Who's your best friend in the industry?
Best friend in the industry. I don't know about a best friend, but one of the really, really good mentors that I've kind of run into and met is a guy called Chris Peel. He's an absolutely fantastic strength conditioning coach and kind of rehab specialist. So whenever I have any issues or I want to run anything by him and just make sure that I'm doing things right, I'll give him a shout. So yeah, Chris is absolutely phenomenal. So any athletes out there that want to go and check him out, go check him out as well. He's really, really good.
Superb. Who's been your best trainer?
I'm going to go back into work next week, and all the lads are going to come into me and be jabbing me on the side. You know what? They all work really, really, really hard. But I'm gonna have to go with Ash again, just simply because I've been with him from the start. I've seen where he's come from to where he is now. That guy just is an absolute workhorse. So yeah, Ashley Reese, definitely.
Biggest lesson learned?
Wow, there's been a few over the year, Irv. There's definitely been a few. I think honesty in kind of knowledge. So there's a lot of times in my younger days where if I didn't know something, I tried to cover that up and maybe get around it a little bit. But I think now knowing that if you don't know something, be honest and open about it and kind of absorb it in, because now you do know it. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones that I've come across.
Oh, love that. Great honesty there, Trev. This is probably the most difficult one. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Passionate, driven, and motivating. I think we'll go with those 3.
Not bad, not bad. I think that's the quickest response we've had so far.
There we go.
Last question from me today, mate, as I know you're a busy man. Is there anyone you would recommend or like to hear on the podcast?
I was having a scroll through the other night, actually, and hearing everybody speaking has been absolutely phenomenal. From a selfish point of view, it would be awesome to hear from some more in-depth strength and conditioning coaches and sports scientists. So that would be really cool to hear more from the fitness side of things as opposed to the coaching side of things.
Okay. Anyone in particular?
probably got a few names, but I'll have to fire you a few over after the podcast and see if we can help link a few up.
No sweat, mate. We'll sit and look at that. Well, Trev, that's it. That's you done for the quick fire questions, mate. Listen, I want to say thank you for your time today. It's been a bit of a long time coming to finally nail down a date in the diary for us, and being so open and honest around your expertise in strength and conditioning and sport and how it's becoming more prevalent within the industry. And listen, your life experiences so far, I'm pretty sure will motivate and inspire many a listener. So again, thank you for taking the time with us, mate. And we wish you all the best with ambition and hopefully, we get back to a little bit of normality soon.
Hopefully, mate. Thank you for having me on, mate. Been an absolute honour and pleasure. So thank you very much.
No, top man. Been great to speak, mate. Hopefully speak soon. And, if we don't, Happy New Year.
And to you, brother.
Top man.
Hello, we are Tile Central UK, local tile stockist here on Trentham Trade Park, Stanley Matthews Way. Our opening hours are 8 till 5 in the week and Saturdays till 12.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy the content that we're trying to bring to you. Don't forget, new episodes will be released every Monday. You can find us on the iTunes Store, Spotify, and if you want to see the video, you can see it on our YouTube channel, PCT Football Coaching.